Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet, and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met while I was supporting a client transforming their business. And I needed finance director support and reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends who share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Strive and Thrive with Alun Tribe. I've not known Alan for long. We met towards the end of 2025, but we've quickly spun up really interesting conversations about business, UK manufacturing, and particularly the automotive sector. Alan is the CEO and owner of IMIG, a consultancy firm that specialises in UK manufacturing turnarounds, but in particular the UK automotive sector. So Alan, welcome to Strive and Thrive. Really great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me along. It's good to see you guys again.
Brilliant. And right, can give you a little head start. Can you give a brief overview, 30 seconds, a minute, on your background and what's led you to IMIG?
Yeah, of course. So right back at the beginning, career-wise, I did an apprenticeship in tool making, which is what Keir Starmer always says his dad was. So I started off in that automotive sector. Got the chance to go to university later on, then went through the defence and aerospace sectors, and then back into manufacturing, in automotive manufacturing. Worked my way through a company to become the MD, quite a big company in the UK, and that's led me into consultancy later on. And initially I was as an independent, worked in France and the UK. Met some guys from IMIG at the time, joined with them in 2000. We created IMIG UK. It was an international company without a UK presence. And when the owner retired, got the chance to buy the global company. So here I am now as the owner, as my whistle-stop tour through a fair few years there.
Very good.
Brilliant. Alan, welcome to the show. It's really nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Amazing. That was a really good summary. Thank you for going through that so nicely, because there's a lot of stuff that you've done in your journey. We've obviously chatted previously, and I was intrigued with the start of your journey, you know, the apprentice toolmaker, and we did have a laugh, I remember, on that initial chat with that Keir Starmer's dad comparison, if you like. But in all seriousness, you know, what humble beginnings, and I guess it gave you an amazing opportunity to kind of learn from the grassroots, if you like, of an organization. And when you told me a little bit more about the detail of that part of your journey, you talked about a private equity takeover of that business, which then spurred you to take your next move. So do you mind telling me a little bit more about that, your kind of time a little bit as an apprentice, you know, what you were enjoying about that, and then that big change?
Yeah, of course. So I think at 16, you're kind of thrown into the workplace. You're obviously pretty young, and I think other than learning some new vocabulary in the first week, it was just this kind of, I guess, completely new experience of the factory started at 7:30 every day. So, you know, having gone from, oh wow, I've got to get up for school and be there by 9, suddenly it was, I've got to be at this place of work by 7:30 every day, or I don't get paid if I don't punch my card. So, you know, we all had our cards to get punched in. And so I think there was an initial kind of kickstart to the realities of how the world was. which were quite different. And I think just in general, you're dealing with people, and in that sector, even then, tool making was almost kind of scaling back in the UK at the time, and that company hadn't had any apprentices for about 20 years. So sort of next youngest person in the area that I worked of about 30 tool makers was like late 40s. So I'd gone from being with people my age all the time, other than teachers, to the next youngest person, had 2 kids, a mortgage, in their late 40s. And then above them, everyone was like late 50s, borderline retired. And I think when I look back on it now, it was an amazing kind of experience to have at 16, because it taught you to deal with like a wide variation of like age groups, people, the issues they brought to work with them, and then the issues they had at work. They were all completely different to what I would have experienced if I'd just gone to college. But I still had the chance to go to college 1 day a week, so I didn't lose. It wasn't like that side of my friendship group, my experiences and learning was removed, but this kind of I was immersed in this new world at a really impressionable age. Probably not all of it was good, but most of it was really good. But it was really good fun. And I think there's some stuff in that you can't really put a price on. And I think it helps you be calmer as well. So when you make a mistake, I think I see it now with some, like younger people I work with in clients, or, even in our company, sometimes a small problem can feel so big for them because it's the first time they've seen it. One of the good things with being in an apprenticeship is they've all seen it so many times. So what felt like this huge failure, they would just be like, hey, it's just a piece of metal. When I look back on it now, these pieces of metal were worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, but they just didn't panic. They just went, we've done this before. This is what we do. I think that helps you as you get older to stay calmer and with a clear head and tackle the problem. And one of the things that I really liked about it is they were almost proud to have an apprentice, although they also kind of used me to clean everything that they didn't want to clean themselves and all of that stuff. They were also super proud to have this apprentice, because it was like you were one of their own kind of coming through the company. And so whilst they were kind of the banter and all of that was there, you were also their kind of, in a way, they were putting their legacy into you. And that was really something quite cool to be part of at the time. And the one thing I would say though is when I did it, and that was something that came out when I was at university, is you learn a lot of stuff because it's the right way to do it, and you don't always know why. And I think that was the difference with getting the academic part of the university, was suddenly all these things that I knew how to do, I didn't quite know why you did it that way always. Suddenly you got the academic foundation to, that's why you do it, because when you're doing that, this is what happens inside the metal, or this is what's happening to this thing. And that being able to put the two things together was amazing for me in my 20s. It sort of like opened up engineering, if I'm honest, as a completely new topic. And I think that's that I see with, like, I think the degree apprenticeships that you see being offered now probably are starting to have some of this element in them as well, because they get people to work with people. So I think that's really good. And you're getting the academic, but you don't get so much of the practical.
Right.
There's almost like a triangle of people, academic, and like hands-on technical that we need to find that balance of. And I think that you almost need this probably like this craft and technician apprenticeship as well as the degree apprenticeship, is it would almost be great to see how could you bring them together and give a pathway from one into the other. I think that would be quite a cool thing to see.
I mean, it sounds like an amazing foundation and great start to your career. It sounds like you really loved it and got so much out of it. And what an advert actually for apprenticeship programs. And it sounds like they probably still need a little bit of tweaking around the edges, but I think it's a really good sound defense and argument for leaning into that. So I'm glad that the government's looking into that and developing that idea. So you'd obviously had this brilliant time and experience, and then this the company got bought out. And how was that fundamental in impacting the business and your journey?
Yeah, I think I actually appreciate it more now, probably because of the last kind of 4 or 5 years of my career than I did at the time. So I was very early 20s, maybe 21, and there was a German fund that bought the company, and I think initially, from talking to some people actually about it since, I think what initially happened is they looked to get some investment to go and acquire another company, and actually what happened is that the fund ended up acquiring them and the other company. And it was fairly brutal because they already had a number of, I would say, they probably weren't competing businesses, but they were supplementary businesses, which meant that a lot of the leadership just wasn't required. And almost on day one, they just started cutting them out of the business. And so this would have been in the late 90s. Then you saw some of the products immediately just get shipped into other locations. And at the time, I mean, it was really busy because we were trying to sort of almost all the things that everyone knew how to do were trying to be, trying to capture it. I mean, the most advanced thing we had was a video camera at the time. So you were trying to capture it, document it, pull the engineering drawings together. And we weren't even sure if the company in the UK would stay open, which it did actually in the end. But I remember the operations director calling me into the office, a guy called Howard, and he'd always been a really good advocate of us as apprentices. And he pulled me in and he said, "Alan, you did the night school option, which you were the only one who did." He said, "I think you could go to university now." We talked about sponsoring you to go to university. He said, "The sponsorship's off the table because they're not going to pay for that." And he said, "In all honesty, the company's going to be very different if it survives at all. I think you just need to go and take a university place and go." And that evening, I put my car on, well, in the book rather than on the web. I put my car in the Auto Trader book that weekend, sold my drum kit, sold a bike, and 3 weeks later started at university. And I think that guy, if I'm honest, that was one of those, you get little bits of advice through your career. And I can still remember being stood in his office and having this discussion. And it was quite emotional discussion, actually, because it was all I'd known since school. And he was literally saying, "Get out now while you can." And I think the whole world opened up from this discussion for me. It was amazing. I don't even know if the guy would still be alive today, but if he was, I'd shake his hand and say thanks and take him for dinner at least, So it's
how was that learning? How has that learning, Alan, shaped you and moved you in the role you're doing now in IMIG? Because I know you as you articulated earlier, you set it up you joined as a UK entity, and then you kind of did a reverse buyout almost of the global group.
Yeah.
How was that reflection of the practical experience, the education of a PE takeover and quite a difficult merger, and then moving into your own academic experience? How have those pieces helped inform your shaping of IMIG?
I think different parts of it shape you in different ways. So I think the lack of clarity about what was happening caused a lot of people, a lot of suffering in all honesty. So I think like when we did the purchase, we were really transparent with the customers, the employees, or at least we tried to be. So we were very clear that this is what it is. There's a plan. This is what we're going to do. I think with one of the things that it's probably helped me do pre-IMIG, but we've kept it going in the company, is with younger people, always tried to give them the advice that was best for them, not always just what was best for the company. And I think one of the things that I really hold dear, I think, comes from that discussion with Howard that day of sometimes you've invested in a person, you think, you would keep them forever if you could, but sometimes that's just not right for them. But what you do is when you free them, you create the biggest advocate of your company that there is in the marketplace. And we've seen that now, that people have come back, and people that we used to work with, or whether it's in IMIG or previous experience that I've had, they're now clients of IMIG. And I think we didn't do it with that. I wish we had done it with that level of forethought. Maybe we'd have done it even more. But that wasn't the purpose to doing it. But that's almost like the universe giving back on it, I suppose. It's been the lucky boomerang effect.
Yeah, that's a lovely altruistic circle there.
Yeah.
I think young people, when you work with them, it's almost like it's probably, I think in our previous chats we talked a bit about legacy and stuff like that, but I think it's a bit about legacy, but also it's that what the difference between the economic compass in your life and the moral compass in your life. And I think when you get to work with young people, that's the chance to really follow the moral compass, and the economic thing needs to almost go to one side for a while. I think that's often hard with education, and without getting political about it, it's very hard, right? Because there's budgets and all of this stuff with it. But I think if at a small local level, we can make these choices and decisions in a non-financial way, other things can come back.
And has that defined your philosophy in IMIG, or is it more that's the Alun style? I'm picking up a bit of both from the way you articulate yourself.
So. I think it's a bit of I think that's my way, but I think probably because we've also got that sort of opportunity as well as a responsibility as an owner. You can kind of make it what you want it to be, right? And I think one of the things is definitely we only hire people we want to work with. So if you're going to work with these people, especially in some of these difficult projects, you're there all hours of the day. And why would you build a team of people that you don't particularly want to spend time with? So I think you've got this element of building something that's nice for myself. But I think if you build something that works like that and it's reciprocal, and people know you're going to do the right thing by them, then it will pay off. And I think the clients see it too. If they see a happy team and that's always united, they're going to see a different level of service from you as well.
That makes a lot of sense. It kind of creates powerful outcomes, doesn't it, when you've got a powerful team based on a strong culture. And that definitely resonates with me. Work with people you like, right, as far as you possibly can, because when you're in the trenches, it makes such a difference. So you've really focused on kind of taking that mentorship that you had, even in that one conversation. I'm sure there was more of that with that individual, and you're kind of passing that on. And that's really, really nice to hear. Are there mentors that you currently lean on now that you're thankful to have?
Definitely. And I think they're good because you also have your blind sides as well, right? So I think there's good sides to the way that we've just discussed and the way I go about it, but the risk is a lot of it's quite emotionally based. So a lot of the way I do things is kind of based on how does it feel, what's the connection with the person, and that you can apply that to, recruitment, the sales process with clients, the delivery of a project. But if you don't have some people that are factual and economic, financially focused and stuff like that, you could end up in a right mess. So I think in general, there's a bit about within the team having people that can coach and mentor each other, so that you're covering each other's blind sides, and knowing what they are is kind of important as well. And then there's sort of like the formalized way as well. So I always used to have a cycling coach when I was young, so I was really into cycling. And I think that was another thing that started back when I was 12. So I think having someone in this role of coach and mentor is quite normal for me anyway, because normally it's your parents, and obviously they've always been there for me. I've been lucky with that as well. But I think having this external person who hasn't got any of that family baggage is really important.
So you have kind of formal coaching yourself now, or informal?
Yeah, I do, and I think that's what you need. So I've got a coach, Jeff. He's brilliant. Even if he can't always talk about the complexities of what you do in your company, but he can pull you back out to the 32,000 foot view and kind of question that, certain things. If you were in another company, would that be allowed? These kind of things that we'd pull you back on. And sometimes afterwards you just sat there going, that was so obvious. I can't believe I couldn't see it, but you just can't sometimes. So I think it's definitely important to have, I think a coach is quite good. And you need them to be quite separate from you and your business, because I think a coach needs to be able to kind of really push your buttons if they need to. And I think a mentor's is slightly different. They both have trust, but I think a mentor is someone where you perhaps almost have more similar motivational styles. So you kind of go into them for a specific type of advice, and you need to know whether that's going to work with your style. And I got that wrong a couple of times. I remember I had a mentor, great person, really, really good, but their motivational style was way more probably like command and control would be the way to explain it. And actually what that did was just put me in so much internal conflict that it was actually burning my energy mentally to do things in that way. And there was nothing wrong with doing it that way. It's very successful for some people and some organizations, but for me it doesn't work.
Do you have a coach, mentor, Romesh? I mean, I don't think I've ever asked you that question.
No, I don't actually. It's interesting because I kind of feel in my role supporting clients, obviously from the financial perspective, I feel I kind of have a little bit of that in what I do, and I think that's really important as an external advisor to have that side. But yeah, I don't have one specifically. I have some very good coaches in my network that I'm quite close to. There's one who will be appearing on a future episode quite soon, actually, and a certain Alan Evans, like that you've met and we'll be chatting with. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely see the absolute value in it. And Alan, it's really interesting hearing you talk about your perception of the difference between a coach and a mentor, because I think that's maybe something that people don't think about enough, actually.
Yeah, I think you need different things from different people for sure. And I think the cycling is the best example of it. I think I didn't need a mentor in cycling, because what I needed someone to do was kind of kick me when I was feeling lazy or hadn't tried to do certain things properly, things like that. Didn't look after my bike and then complained when the gears didn't work in a race. And so you need, I think sometimes with the coach, they're the person that stops you, doesn't allow you to have an off-ramp in a difficult situation kind of thing. It's probably like the best way. They say, no, you've got to find a way through it. Whereas I think a mentor is the person that you can, it's almost like being able to bounce your concerns around with in a different way. So like maybe it's safer, I think would be the way I'd explain it. But I would say to every business owner, go and get one. Even if you think everything's going super well today, sometimes we've had periods where, luckily really many periods where everything's been going super well. And actually that's when my coach has been saying to me, it's going super well, but you could be even better. And, and it's that sort of, where do you think you're operating at? 90% of your capability and it's all going super well? Because I've looked at this, and I've looked at some people I think are similar to you, and I think you're more like 30%. So when you're going to fill the other 70%? That's the exact conversation we had 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago on Wednesday. You're at 30%. What are you going to do? And I think if you don't have someone, sometimes you need that shake to say, yeah, you're right.
Are you competitive, Alan?
Yeah.
You obviously talk about your cycling, but you come across as really humble, and that's an interesting sort of balance, right?
Yeah. You're actually doing a really good job at making me think, oh yeah, I should look at that. Mike, do you have a coach or a mentor?
No. I've been looking for the right one, to be honest, at the right time, I think. And I think, Alan, you've given a good justification and reason why, I think. And I think I'm curious to know how that would work with me, and what the implications would be of letting go and being sort of having someone oversee the kind of world that I'm in a kind of reflective way. And I guess that makes me nervous too, right? That's the apprehension being told off almost, because that's ultimately what a coach is, right? Come on, go faster.
Yeah.
Change direction. Why are you doing this?
Things with it as well. Like if you take sport, I'm a really big believer that sport is a very good grounding for business. I'm probably not in 100% of cases, but I do think there's a lot of parallels from it. I remember a cycling coach, and I've heard that from a psycho kind of sports psychologist more recently, where they really push you to take the stuff you're good at and systemize it. Which, how many times have you heard that? Whether you've got a business that you want to run, or a business you want to sell, or a business you want to franchise, or a business you want to grow, you need to systemize it, and you need to take all the stuff that you're really good at. So I think that's what a coach is really good at, kind of pushing you to systemize. And the other thing they do is they take what you're good at and they get you to really focus on it and get yourself even better. I won't use the exact words that the sports psychologist used, but it was, you've got to take that, because that's your like special sauce, for want of a better word. How do you go and replicate that all the time? Never let it drop. Never let that go, because the moment you do, you're not special. You're just one of the others in the list of companies. So I think his example was, do you think Erling Haaland spends hours and hours a week learning how to tackle, or do you think he spends hours and hours a week shooting and heading goals? And I think that was really interesting. It's going to completely date the episode of this podcast for you, because in 20 years everyone's going to be going, who? But
I think he'll be a name that lingers for a long time. So I think that's an okay example.
Yeah, but I think that was a really interesting example, and I think that's something that you just don't think of.
I think I've had the opportunity to interview lots of sports professionals who have come out and have looked at starting their own businesses, and it was an interesting opportunity. I think the drive for success in sport gives you a power of really pushing through, and I think that is an incredibly interesting comparator to being an entrepreneur. I think there's subtle differences in there. One is very self-driven and self-motivated, and the other is much more collegiate to what you're talking about in terms of being humble, Alan. But that kind of drive is really interesting. And it's the same, actually. I've worked a lot with the military. And it's the same kind of experience of working with the military. I find they're very, very natural, I think, at becoming could become natural entrepreneurs, sports people, military. I think just with some of the help around perhaps the skills that, because they don't think they can do it, more than actually the innate learning and behavior that they get from that kind of experience.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of natural entrepreneurs, and I guess the UK's quite lucky to have had a number of them, very famous ones, in its history. And I think that I think you remember the successful ones, though, right? You don't really remember the ones that had great ideas. We remember a few of the ones that had great ideas that failed, but in general, you remember the ones that have been really, really successful. And if you look at the ones in the world today, and a lot of them are American billionaires, they what they've managed to do is systemize. So it's not just that they've had this amazing idea, it's that they've honed it to a level and systemized it to a level where they can make money out of it. And I think that's part of the problem, is a lot of entrepreneurs don't take that second step. And I think you see it in the statistics of most businesses, and most startups don't get past year 2 or 3, right? And I think that's kind of
it's a huge failure rate. I think it's in the UK it's around 60 to 70% in the first 3 to 5 years. It's huge. Can I ask, how would you define systemize?
I think it's at that point where the business founder, there's a level of it that's documented. I guess it's, there is a documentation system. There is tools have been put in place that allow people to follow them, and not necessarily complicated ones, just there are rules. There's a way of working that can be communicated. I think that's what it means to me. And I think that, that's the bit that I think just doesn't get done. And it's too reliant on the individual, and the day they step back, or the day they're sick, or they go, that's the other challenge with entrepreneurs. They often find the next new shiny thing, and off they go, and everyone's left behind. It doesn't work, right? And I think that's the gap.
This is really interesting to me, because on this talk that, or this discussion, Mike and I both said we don't have coaches or mentors per se, although I think that Mike's gonna deny this now, but I would say we potentially slightly coach, mentor each other, because whilst working together on this podcast, we've gotten to know each other a lot more, and we've learned more about each other's businesses and how we do things. And I think because we both want each other to succeed, we've kind of put in, different ideas and thoughts as to how the other might do better. And, in the nicest, and positive way. So certainly I hesitate to say this, but having Mike kind of gently challenge me at times, I think I found really beneficial. So that is very much to your point. And just to kind of just add as well, on the military, Mike, which you mentioned, and the sporting analogy, which you brought in, Alan, it structures it's discipline as well, isn't it? It's focus. These professions require a huge amount of focus, and I think that's a key ingredient.
Yeah, and standards. I think setting clear standards is sometimes
we
hard.
talk a lot in this. We talk a lot over the last year and a half, and I wrote in 2025 particularly, it was a big topic of most of our discussions, was resilience.
Yeah.
And I think that rolls into the two personas perfectly that we've just talked about. And I'd say the resilience that stands up true is entrepreneurs or founders like yourself, or individuals who can work through some of the challenges, because we talk about how running a business is like a roller coaster ride. You have a good period and you don't celebrate it, and you have a bad period and you beat yourself up. And it's about how you navigate that. And to your point, Alan, the coaches, the the people like Romesh giving me advice, the people I talk to on this giving advice. It's amazing how that really does help you reflect on where you are as a business and what you might need to consider.
Definitely.
I
I think if anyone, any listeners have got kind of ideas or things like that, I'm a big believer in once you start applying energy into something without getting like spiritual about it. I think if you put energy into something, it often opens up pathways and something comes back. And whether that's just like playing the yellow car game with your kids in the car and suddenly that's all you can see everywhere, or because you've become open. But I think the coaching thing is a perfect example for me of that. So I had a discussion with someone. Oh, maybe I should look at that because I always used to have it for cycling. Don't have it now. I've seen a few people are doing it. Maybe I should do it. Went to France to visit family. One of my French friends is a lawyer. It was Christmas maybe 4 years ago. He said, I just got myself a coach because he's trying to really get his chambers to grow. His first time he's employing other lawyers. He was really stressed about it all. And he was just so happy he had one. So it happened there. It happened, but the week before it happened there. On the flight back home, I'm on LinkedIn and I was just like looking through, saw a few on there, didn't think any more of it. On the Monday, I was at a client. We just sat down in a bit of a breakout area after the first meeting. My phone rang. I just picked it up, didn't even look. And it was a coach cold calling, probably because they'd seen me on LinkedIn, right? But because of all this discussion that happened, I said, yeah, let's have a proper meeting. When I met him, gone like a house on fire, and Jeff's been coaching me for 4 years ever since. And I think this whole point of once you have some ideas, things down to you to put the energy in. And if you put some energy in, it doesn't need to be that much. Something will happen.
I think it's a little bit deeper for me in terms of your approach, though, Alan. I think you're very empathetic. You listen and you're taking it on board. I think it's not just about full speed energy. It's about action with kind of the ability to reflect and learn. Because your point around you'd want to try something and go for it and it will happen. I'm not sure that'll happen. You'll get some feedback. You'll get feedback, and the feedback is what you build, isn't it? That's the magic in this sort of conversation. It's the fact that, and I think you've come across really well in the first part of this session, that 40 minutes. And what tells me is that it's the empathetic way of thinking about your team, who you engage with, why you're doing things, the coaching need. It's that drives it, I think.
There's a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness there, isn't there? And that links in nicely to a podcast we did recently, a fantastic chap called John Dyack, who talked to us in depth about self-awareness and how the best founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs are self-aware and will seek help in areas where they need that improvement, or they will think more deeply about things as things progress. So I would absolutely agree with Mike. But fascinating as this has been, can we move on to another topic which I found fascinating about you, Alan, and that's the fact that you ended up buying a global business. Which I think is a pretty good story. Please, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so well, it was a bit of a curveball, I suppose. So always wanted to have my own business from quite a young age. If I'm honest, always wanted to have a manufacturing business. That was the kind of ultimate dream. And who knows, maybe that'll happen one day. But so I started off, I think I said before, as a sort of one-man band. Had a couple of really big projects, covered best part of 2.5, 3 years, and got to the point where on some of those projects I could see that there were opportunities. I could have brought in some other experts, but because I didn't have them yet, probably didn't have the cash security yet, they would end up going to agencies and other places to pull them in. But often I felt like they just got someone who was kind of good enough to tick the box of filling a role. and I felt like it could be better. And then I met the IMIC guys on a project, quite a difficult project where a very key automotive manufacturer had gone into administration. I was there for one manufacturer, they were there for another, a German one, but got on with the team really well, because it initially started off, to be honest, it could have been a big confrontation because there was only about 20 machines in this factory, but they probably needed about 70 machines to make all the parts that everyone needed. So I was really in a negotiating with this with IMIG at the time to kind of get my customers' parts made, and got on really well. Went our separate ways, and a few months later got a call from the CEO, who I hadn't met, basically saying, look, Brexit's happened, and we've got the opportunity to do quite a big piece of work with a UK brand, but we probably would be better if we had a UK presence. Would you be interested in joining the company? So we had a bit of a chat around that, and I said to him basically at the time that I've had 2.5 years not working for anyone else, and to be frank, I don't want to go back. So me joining IMIG doesn't seem like it's the right option, but I could subcontract. And in fairness, he came back with the proposal of, well, why don't we JV? Let's create IMIG UK, do it as a JV. So that's what we did. We both put our money in, created the local company. In fairness to him, we had work available pretty much from day one. Well, actually, it was before that. We didn't even have a company bank account, so we'd incorporated the company on the Friday. The work started on the Monday, and the bank account came about 2 weeks later, or something crazy. And it was really crazy. And but it started off well, and we'd go into that in a bit. But I remember the company was like 2 months old, and the lockdowns hit. It was almost like the worst possible time to try and launch a business. But and then after a couple of years, he was in his 60s, German guy, Matthias, and they in Germany, the banks are a bit more restrictive on lending once the main or the principal of a company reaches like over the age of 60. So, which is going to be interesting with the aging dynamics of the world, right? So they might need to revisit that policy. But luckily for me, they haven't yet. And so he called a meeting in the December time with myself and the guy who headed up the German office, a guy called Christian. We thought it was just going to be like a Christmas meal and a thanks for a good year kind of chat. And he dropped the bombshell of, well, the banks are like this, and I've been doing it for a really long time. 26 years, I think at the time, 24 years, it was 24. Next year it's 25, and it's time for me to sell up. So I wanted to offer it to the two of you first. At which point Christian dropped the bombshell of, well, actually I'm off to live on a boat and travel around the world, so I don't want to buy it, thanks. And so I got first dibs on the whole thing. So that set that in motion, and we went away to try and find a way to buy the company. Obviously, we were coming at a point with, being honest, like very limited kind of personal funds. The company was doing okay, but it didn't have millions of pounds in the bank. So it was going to need to be a kind of leverage deal somehow with a funder. Didn't want to do private equity because of the experience I'd had as an apprentice and seeing what happened there. So that put me off. Doesn't necessarily mean that I think that now, but that was my thinking at the time. And so really went to high street banks, couldn't get anything to work. And in fact, my coach, Jeff, put me in contact with some people that he'd heard about, and that looked really positive. So we got the deal, and it was around the June time. Everything was fine, and we'd agreed that the date was always going to be like in the November, because that allowed the original owner to get the 25-year anniversary under his watch kind of done. So that was sort of a nice personal thing for him. So we're all going well, and then the timeline's a bit, I can't remember all the dates, but essentially Liz Truss became a prime minister, and before the cabbage had wilted, the stock market and everything went crazy. And the problem I had was the financial market reaction obviously tanked the pound value, and I was buying the business in euros. So suddenly I didn't have enough money to buy the company. So literally the whole thing got called off because it needed certain things to happen through the German legal system at the time, with all the people involved, and it kind of put a bit of stress into the relationship as well at the time. I remember thinking it's really difficult, and it was my personal research in the end. So the banks kind of just said, well, it can't be done now. That's the way it was. And luckily for me, the British Business Bank released a new kind of funding approach for business acquisition. And it was available through the high street bank that we banked with. I think I might have said this to you before, Mike. What surprised me was I was calling them to tell them about the deal that the British Business Bank had. Yet on the British Business Bank website was my bank's logo in massive, huge title saying like, this is where you should go to get this product. And the bank didn't even have a clue they existed. And so we kind of, that kicked off a whole load of investigation of how they could get it done. And I always remember that the previous owner had given me basically 2 weeks, or he was going to go to market with a PE fund that had shown some interest. And I think on the Wednesday of the second week, we sat down in Costa Coffee and with the banking documents, and we were signing them as we were downloading them, with a DocuSign or whatever, and getting this thing signed off in a Costa. Because I was working at a client away from home to get the company through. And we literally got the loan money through, and we got it pushed pretty much that day to get it done, so we didn't get any problems again. And we bought the company. So it was what started off as a kind of really exciting journey became a absolute kind of blind panic. What are we going to do? The family was pretty angry at me because the whole summer holiday I spent camped in a bedroom upstairs, just looking for loans all the time. And every time my phone rang up, that we were at, whatever amusement park that day or wherever we were. And I spent the whole time on my phone instead of watching them try not to be sick on a fairground ride. And that whole summer just passed by. But
yeah. You must be really grateful to the British Bank for coming up with the goods.
Yeah, I think I've got a sort of mixed. I think obviously the outcome's really, really good, but the journey was really bad. And I think one of the things that I found frustrating at the time was whether you were pro-Brexit and Remain, whatever you've thought about. One of the big things that was articulated all the time was, the UK is going to be flexible, the UK is going to have control, we're going to do all of this. And I was sat there going, there's a German company with offices, it owns companies in the UK, Japan, China, and America. And I've got the chance for the UK company to buy all those locations, including Germany, which must, it should have been exactly what the people that, had marketed Brexit to us wanted to happen. I couldn't get anyone to help. I talked to the local MPs. They didn't have a clue what I was talking about. No one would kind of get on board. And yet now it's done. And I do have conversations with this type of person, and they're like, oh, that's brilliant. That's exactly the sort of story we want. I was like, yeah, but you weren't interested in helping make the story.
How did you make it happen then, Alan?
I think when you get into these, situations, it's a bit like what we talked about before, about not panicking and maybe that competitive nature coming off of thinking there must be a way to go and get this money. You see all these deals going on all the time. The money, it's not like the money doesn't exist. There's more than enough money in the world. It's just in the wrong places for us most of the time, right? So it's I think just almost being belligerent with it. Like every type of loan that was available in the market, I went and looked at it, and obviously there's always some kind of catch. And what I actually did do was I wrote down some rules, like these are some things that I wasn't prepared to do. So if it needed any of those, it wouldn't happen. So like I wasn't prepared to put like all the equity of my house down, but I was prepared to put some money down personally as a guarantee, but not the house. I wasn't prepared to give up more than X% of the equity in the company in order to do it. You know, all of these kind of things that were good. There were certain countries I wouldn't borrow money from, for, to be honest, like more like sort of humane reasons rather than business ones. So stuff like that, things that I wouldn't touch.
So you knew your red lines, and that clarity must have been very helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really hard to write down what you needed, but often I think that's probably like human nature, right? It's really easy to write down the things you don't like. So that was where I started. Like, that's the stuff that I don't want. Okay, how can I find anything else? And almost like even if it had a problem, but it wasn't on my list, it meant, okay, well, I need to solve that problem. So it almost reduced the number of problems I had to solve, I think.
Interesting. What an interesting story. But it also, the way you told it, it's really nicely explained how you approach things, Alan, in terms of competition, empathy, I think, and the experience of actually just keep going and keep exploring, keep reaching out to people, keep getting feedback, and seeing if you can find an angle, like you say. Such an interesting event. What's your reflection now? A number of years later, you're now the owner. What's your next step for IMIG, you, and the reflections on where you've got to?
I think the reflections are maybe a couple of points, maybe a couple of things on that. One, just to link back to what I said before, is, you know, my outburst of the way I explained it. It's not like a political thing. I think it's more that people need to realize that although a lot of people say stuff, they're probably not going to help you. So you do have to make it happen for yourself if you want it. And I think that's really what I'm trying to get across to people is, if you want to do this, you've got to go and make it happen. Because if you don't, no one else will. And if they don't see that hunger from you, no one else will come to the table. So that's the point with that. And I think now on the reflection of it, there was like an initial euphoria. And then I think even when you do your due diligence, and in all honesty, I probably didn't do enough because I felt really comfortable. I was buying the company I already worked in. What I would say to people is do it and spend the money. I also bought it without a lawyer. We did it in 2 phases. We bought like a majority out of the company, like 80%, and then another 20, slightly after. And I didn't use a lawyer for the 80, and actually ended up learning a lot and doing a lot, but I burnt a lot of energy that I really didn't need to burn. So I think get a good lawyer, get a team. Maybe that's Romesh for the finances. You know, all joking aside, like get some people that are experts in certain things and get them on board. Because once the initial euphoria kind of went away, I found a lot of stuff that I didn't know about. You know, some things in China that needed to be resolved that had been there for a long time. Some things in Europe that needed to be done, and suddenly you're dealing with legislation. You can kind of understand where it's coming from, but the nuances are very different to the UK. And I think that side of it, I probably, through pure naivety, just kind of stumbled into. But I think in a way I'm giving all this advice now. It's a bit like when you become a parent, right? Everyone gives you all this advice. You still go and do it yourself and learn it the hard way. I think I wouldn't necessarily change it because I've learned an awful lot about myself and about the company. But I think the one thing I would have done was got some advisors a bit earlier on the due diligence, just to kind of, I might not have changed anything that I did in the deal, but at least I'd have had my eyes open to what was going to come after the deal. And I think that's part of the problem is for me, like, I think the initial way it was going was kind of quite calm and there was a bit of a process. And then when it collapsed, I lost sight of I'm going to own this thing at the end. And it became about how do I get a deal done? And which is unusual for me. Often I'm a long game person in all honesty, but I get completely transfixed on the gateway I had to get through. And so I actually put myself in an unusual position like that mentally. Probably is what needed to be done. Otherwise it wouldn't have happened. But it meant I lost the longer view. And the flip side of that is now, everything that we've done since has just been like this big crazy journey full of highs and lows. But, the good side of, rebranding and getting to put your own kind of stuff together and building a culture that you like in the company. And there were people in different countries that didn't want to work the way we do. And someone told me right at the beginning, that's why I say that my experience with the German PE firm I would have different view on it now. The advice I got from some people that I can really trust was you've got your own brand. It's not an enormous company, but it's big enough, but you don't want to do this piecemeal. Like if you're going to cut people out that don't fit, you've got to do it once. Just get it done once, make the changes now so that you don't create like rumor mill after rumor mill in your company, and make the changes early and build the team that you want to have from the beginning. And I think that piece of advice was extremely sound because when we had found all these issues in the company, I think it would have been easy to go, oh, we'll deal with America now, and then we'll go and look at what's gone on in China, and then we'll go and actually what we did was we reviewed it all. So we took a bit longer up front, and then we made our decision and we went bam, and we got it all done. And I think we're much stronger for it, 3 years down the road, because everyone in the company now is all on the journey together. And I think that was something we needed to do without disrupting the customer.
Yeah, really good. Such an amazing story, Alan. I'd love to see where you've got to. And so very quickly, because we're going to finish in a second, but what's next for IMIG? But maybe more interestingly, what's next for Alan?
I think next for IMIG, I think we're looking to expand. So we do a lot of work in automotive. Last year, we started to do a bit more work in medical and aerospace and defence. We'd really like to grow that because it's what we've seen is the skills and the talent we've got in the team totally work in those areas, and actually it's quite enjoyable for the team as well as for the client. So I think that's the next step for IMIG, is trying to widen our bandwidth. And then next for Alan, I've been enjoying doing some advisory type work, which is, although we were like an advisory firm, but doing it in a slightly different context. I'd like to do that. I've done a bit of work with the Automotive Council in the UK, which has opened my eyes to a bit more about how the way government works and that side of things. So I think that could be an option to kind of investigate. The STEM ambassador stuff with like developing like the future kind of generation of talent we're going to need is something I want to pursue as well. And then maybe buying that manufacturing company one day as well. So I've got plenty of ideas.
Oh, I like that. You might not have been the original founder of IMIG, Alan, but you're definitely now the founder of IMIG, if that's your approach. What next? Let's go look for new businesses. But firstly, thank you very much for joining us on Strive and Thrive. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been such an interesting story. You've covered a number of areas. I think some of the ideas of your early career and how that's influenced your latter career is fascinating. I think the deep dive that we went on coaching and the effect that's had on you and helped you build IMIG and successful outcome of the business is great. And I think the story of how you, don't know the words, reverse it, bought image from it within is really interesting. And I think that's a story for a number of people who could consider as sort of you both gave the mechanisms and an approach, get support, due diligence, legal advice, finance advice from Romesh, but also the emotional experience of it as well, which was tough, I think is fair to say, and there's personal learning on that as well. So such a really interesting episode. Romesh, anything to add?
Yeah, well, firstly, Alan, that was such a great conversation. I just really enjoyed listening to all of your experiences. The takeaways from me, I think, you've made such a good case for, the value of a good apprenticeship program. And I'm a real supporter of it. And I thought that was great. I love the self-awareness, the self-reflection, the discussion about coaches and mentors, you relying and leaning upon those, but also trying to do the same yourself. That's really been fascinating and interesting. And, the belligerence, you've made things happen. That's a key message here. And, an earlier part of the conversation, you said when you had that chat with Howard, that very night, you pivoted. I mean, you literally that night sold stuff or started the process. And I think you said within 3 weeks you were in university. And I have to say, that shows a tremendous amount of adaptability. You got some new information, you got some good advice, and you acted on it. And that proactivity, I think, is a testament to you, and it's a lesson for all of us, actually. So thanks again. It's been excellent.
It's been great to chat to you both. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome, Alan. So thank you, everyone, for listening or watching, and we hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Strive and Thrive is a podcast for entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Strive and Thrive.